Welcome back to part 2 of 2 about Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. As you can see, we're going to start with the 4th stage and work our way through all 5 of those, all the way up to 8. Now, we left off at this point where we were talking about, or we were going to talk about 6 to 12-year-olds. Some important things have changed with these kids. If you remember the last stage that we were talking about, they were pre-operational, they were very much perceptually dominated, and they really weren't that interested in what you had to say. So success came with the accepting of the challenge. Now, these kids are transitioning cognitively into concrete operations. So as they're transitioning into concrete operations, we see that not only do they want meaningful challenges, but they have to have some recognition. So when you're doing assessment or instruction, one of the implications that we need to remember about this particular stage of the theory is that these kids want to see their successes. They want to hear you say it. They want to see their successes up on the board or outside in the hallway or in some other way. They want you to trumpet the fact that they have been successful. The second stage that we have up here is actually a lot of fun. If you work with middle school students or high school students, you're working with kids who are in adolescence. Adolescents are trying to figure out all sorts of things. They're trying to figure out who they are on every one of these measures: personal, social, sexual, occupational. They're also trying to find their own way in their societal relationships and the hierarchies there. And they come to this sense of who they are, this identity, by going through a lot of experimentation. That's why when we think about these kids, we think about very risky behaviors, their willingness to do things that, or to be involved with a variety of different situations that we may think that that's really not good. Well, we're speaking, when we have that opinion, we're speaking from our experience because we've already gone through that. They are trying to figure out who they are. So their experiences are all in these areas, trying to figure out where they fit in. Look, they will develop a sense of identity if they're successful throughout here, or they'll come out of this. Remember, the window will open and close. If they come out of this and they've not figured this out, then we're dealing with some fairly confused young adults. We have to do what we can to support that process. The important thing when we're teaching adolescents is to remember that it's really not about the curriculum. It's about the relationships that we have with the students. Teaching adolescents is about relationships, and it is perhaps the most subversive kind of teaching that you can do, because all of these other things that they are about are not curriculum. The things that they are about are things that have to do with identity. Let's move on. This intimacy versus isolation. The concept of intimacy, as it is given to us by Erikson, is not a physical intimacy that we might think of with sex or something like that. What we're talking about here is a willingness to give of yourself without fear of reprisal. So intimacy for young adults is more about openness to others, and it comes through relationships. So if we're talking about relationships, again, this is relationships with perhaps young adults. We're probably talking about the parents of these students. We may be talking about ourselves. This may be something that helps us to understand how we operate. When we are taking this part of the theory and applying it to the classroom, probably the most important implication of this theory, or of this stage, is that when we talk to the parents, we need to affirm who they are. If their child is doing great, it's easy for them to have a good, strong sense of their own worth as well, because they're very tightly tied into that in terms of their identity at this stage. But if they're not doing well, and if all they ever hear from us is negativity about how your child is misbehaving, your child is failing, your child's not achieving, if that's what they hear from us, openness is not going to result. And our relationships with the parents will be crippled, and our ability to work with their children will also be crippled, because there will be a monologue that goes on at home for far more hours than we have with our students, and it's going to be one of negativity toward the school and the teacher. So this is about relationship building as well. We look at this next stage. This one, generativity versus stagnation, is sort of a hard one to understand until we begin to think about where we see parents during the times when we're not in school. For instance, let's say that we go to a rec game, some kind of a soccer game or football game or whatever it is. But we go to watch the game, and we look around and we notice that there's no parent for this child. This child's in my class. I'm the teacher. Why should I be here and not the parent? Well, we tend to get that way a little bit. We have to remember that that parent may be under this kind of a growth process, generativity versus stagnation. They're trying to understand, or they're trying to establish a sense of busyness, generativity. I'm producing things. I'm being effective. Productivity, creativity, and concern for the next generation is actually, and we may think sort of weirdly, expressed through the job. So, all of that may mean that that parent's not there because they are at work. They're not there because they are trying to express this need for social responsibility. Our job in this case is more to understand and less to judge. We really can't afford to be judgmental. Even though we may want to be that way, we really can't. And the last one, integrity versus despair, this stage is a very difficult one. Think about the finality of it. First, it happens during old age. It could be with people who are grandparents. We know that we have students whose grandparents are the ones who are responsible for them. They may be in this stage of life, old age. They may be looking at the end of their life and saying, have I done good? Good as opposed to bad or evil. Have I become all that I am? Is my legacy going to be one that is good? And what we need to remember is that many times these folks are dealing with things that they don't quite understand, because society that a child is living in now is way different from the society that the grandparent was raised in. And in many cases, the grandparent has not really kept up with popular society or popular culture and isn't really that familiar with what's going on. So they begin to feel a little bit lost. And these are the kind of folks who they come in, sit down for a parent conference, and you maybe give them 10 seconds worth of, your child is doing this in this class, they're doing this well, they have this, and then the parent, or the child, the grandparent begins to tell a story. And it was about how things were way back when, or when I was younger, or whatever. It's a story about their experience, but more importantly, it is a narrative of their life. And in that narrative, your role is to be the listener. Not the responder or the evaluator, but the listener. If they ask a question, wait to see if it's really a question, because it may not be a question, it may just be a pause, and they're about to go on. This person is trying to answer the question, did I do good? Think about how high the stakes are. If that answer is yes, what an incredible life this person has had. If the answer is no, we'll leave it there.